I was just standing in the shower thinking about all the videos I could be making and how I'm not really making them. And it led me down this path of thinking that, you know, things have changed. Right. When you look at like the gaming community, when you look at the grifters and the scene in general, like what you see is a pretty common pattern. Gaming journals and YouTubers are losing relevancy. No one takes them seriously. No one respects them. Nobody really cares about them at all. While Nintendo not only is winning, on the they are on path to establishing themselves as the gaming monopoly, the go-to gaming platform for everyone in the gaming space. Now we're in this phase where a lot of people are still in denial about that, primarily PC gamers, but the it's safe to say that it is true, right? When it comes to every real gaming niche, right? When it comes to strategy games, when it comes to online shooters, when it comes to platformers, when it comes to level design tools, when it comes to everything Nintendo produces, all of it is pretty much dominant in its niche, right? When you compare something like Zelda and Horizon Zero Dawn, it's really easy to see just how far ahead Zelda is of not only Horizon, but every single one of its competitors, right? Skyrim and Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring, right? Like, to me, it couldn't be more obvious that Zelda, the team behind it, are capable of evolving and growing their brand beyond that which everyone else is doing. Right? To me, looking at Elden Ring and all the hype and enthusiasm about it, it reminds me a lot of Assassin's Creed, right? When people were back in 2007, where people were getting excited about Jade's game, and they love the historical aspects and they love the setting and the open world, and now looking back on it, Assassin's Creed is looked down on as like the absolute bottom of the barrel trash open world formula, right? Like nobody likes Ubisoft. And this is the current situation of gaming, in which everything that comes out is hyped up, worshipped, forgotten about, and then used as an example of what not to do in gaming spheres, right? We saw this with like Resident Evil 2 remake and now Silent Hill 2 remake, where we had a lot of people involved in the process. People who worked on the original, Konami, Blooper Team, they all came out and said that like, oh, this game's gonna be awesome. We're so excited about these remakes. Like, oh, like people, there were people who bought into that. There were people who worshipped Silent Hill 2 and Resident Evil 2 remake, right? They tried propping these up as being better than the original, but the people who fall for that were people who were never really fans of the original to begin with. And that's becoming a real problem when it comes to game devs trying to prop up established, trying to prop up anti Nintendo products like long term, right? Because I remember, right, when people tried to tell you that Twilight Princess was a disappointment, and that Okami and Darksiders was way superior. Not only did we get inferior sequels for Okami and Darksiders, right? Not only did all of that fall off and become irrelevant in a matter of years, we're at the point now where people who grew up playing Twilight Princess, who understand it, who have a good understanding of the early Wii era and what it brought to the table, right? Those people are advocating for Twilight Princess as an underappreciated classic, right? Like a lot of people I've been seeing, I've been talking about Twilight Princess lately and Wind Waker because these games were relentlessly attacked and mocked by the establishment. And when you attack and mock a game to the extent of Wind Waker or Donkey Kong 64 or Donkey Kong Country 3, you eventually cultivate an audience of people who played the games growing up and understand that, like, wait a minute, I enjoyed that game. I liked the game. And so what ends up happening is this weird resurgence of popularity, right? Donkey Kong Country 3 is not a particularly good 2D platformer, okay? I've spoken out about it, about not being as good as the first two, right? I don't really care for it that much. It's just okay, okay? But, the more I play it, the more I understand it. Like, it's not bad either, right? It's just not as good as the first two, right? So it's perfectly acceptable to like Donkey Kong Country 3, but everybody at the time did this thing where, like, oh no, Rareware is falling off. Donkey Kong Country is a dead IP. This and 64 are such disappointments. Donkey Kong 64 killed the collectathon genre. And years later, people are looking back at that narrative and realizing that it was always a load of crap to prop up what Nintendo's competitors were doing at the time, right? There's no denying that Donkey Kong 64 is a classic, right? It's shocking to me just how popular that game remains today among today's kid audience. And yet, at the time, we were expected to believe that like Sonic or Crash Bandicoot was more popular. No, absolutely not. But game journals really tried establishing this narrative. And they still try to do it today, right? Like, again, nothing has really changed. We saw two major Switch releases come out in 2023, right? Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom. And we saw in real time Jeff Keighley and the Shill Show trying to brush those games under the rug, trying to make it look like Alan Wake 2 was better, that Baldur's Gate 3 was better, that these games weren't really worth talking about at all, right? So many people spoke out against Mario Wonder in particular as not being a particularly good game, how the 2D platformer was dead, how it was a played out genre, and it couldn't be more obvious to me that Mario Wonder is shaping up to be an all-time classic in regards to 2D platformers, right? I These people managed to gaslight an entire generation into hating the new Super Mario Bros. Games, but I think that's not going to be possible for Wonder for a lot of reasons. Wonder, I think, is going to have a major is going to remain very relevant over the next several years. We saw this with the Switch, right? A lot of Wii U games came out on the Switch and became huge sellers. New Super Mario Bros. U sold 20 million units. A re-release of a decade-old game outsold Baldur's Gate 3. That tells you all you need to know about the enduring popularity and success of 2D Mario games. But the online gaming space does not admit it. And they are just so out of touch with what's actually happening in the scene, what people are actually playing, what they're actually talking about, and instead are intent on like just fabricating these really weird narratives that don't really make a whole lot of sense, right? Like look at Echoes of Wisdom, for example. Leading up to release, we had people complaining about the dungeon design and the mechanics and how casual it looked, the art style, and then it comes out and it was really successful. So these people had to pivot and try and manufacture weird controversies about the game, right? The one example I pointed out that I haven't seen anybody else talk about, people are seriously trying to make a controversy over you not being able to select a costume with Zelda without the hood. So like if you're playing with the hood, you have to have it up at all times. You can't like lower the hood like she does in cutscenes, right? Like you can play as her like that in one part of the game, like two rooms, but for the most of the part, like she always keeps the hood up or she has like her alternate costume. So for me, this is like a really good example of just how delusional the Pretendo community has actually become, where they have to complain about alarm clocks, they have to complain about costumes, they have to complain about Nintendo, uh, like Nintendo in general. Like they don't really have a leg to stand on. Like when you compare what Nintendo is doing to everyone else, it couldn't be more obvious that they're doing a way better job than than Sony or Microsoft, right? When you compare like what Nintendo did with their female leads compared to what Sony is doing with like Ellie and that Ghost of Yobel chick, like you really see like a stark contrast between like Nintendo's respect for the audience, their ability to craft unique, interesting games, and to really make their female lead shine, right? Like whenever Sony does this, it comes off as like really generic and Hollywoodish, but Nintendo really has this really unique, great way of just making cool, interesting games. And I think most people understand this. I think most people understand this. I respect it. I think that the Pretendo community is a dying minority. And as a result of that, like I'm finding more and more that it's really impossible for me to make commentaries on their behavior because more and more I'm starting to realize that nothing these people say or do matters, right? The market is constricting. People aren't consuming this slop like they used to, right? AAA games are not selling. People aren't clicking on clickbait YouTube videos regarding Nintendo, right? Review Tech USA is has left the industry, right? Like again, who exactly is there left to fight? You know, like what exact like we're winning in that sense. So to me, it's like, why even bother talking about these things when you know like how it's gonna play out like already? When like it's already like in full swing, people are already admitting to it to a certain extent. Like they just won't do it publicly or can't wrap their minds around like the implications of it. Because I do think people really underestimate just how successful something like Splatoon is, or Fire Emblem is, or Pokemon is. You know, like people really don't understand that these brands are not gonna fall overnight, and the gaming hardware is not gonna go anywhere, right? Like to me, they uh, they don't understand the position that Nintendo is in. They don't understand that this company is on top and is essentially a pioneer when it comes to game design and its synergy with its brands, right? With its hardware and its software. Even today, I still see so many people insist that like Nintendo dropped the ball at some point, or they fell off, or they stopped being good, and yet like it's nothing but a cope. And I think more and more people are beginning to realize that.